Hello. Welcome to the Yoga for the Creative Soul book club. Today, thanks for holding that up. As we're continuing through chapter 6, we're in part 2 of Yoga for the Creative Soul, which is exploring your 5 paths to your true and creative self. And the first of the paths that we're looking at is the path of karma yoga, of, in this context, of action and also of purpose, living the soul's purpose and allowing the soul to truly speak through us, allowing our creative endeavors, no matter how they turn out, right? That's the thing with expressive arts. The end product is not the point. We're not judging our outputs. We're not judging what we produce. It is through that act of self-expression that we're getting the benefits and moving closer to who we truly are. And that's purposeful. That is aligning us, harmonizing us with who we truly are. We talked about acceptance last week as the first of that 4-step process of karma yoga. And this week, we're on an activity that spans page 87 and 88. Before we really get rolling, I want to acknowledge where yoga comes from. India, it's a 5,000-year-old tradition. It began as an oral tradition and was only for spiritual initiates, for the masters, and over time has become available to us householders as well, just in the last century or so. But it is an Indian tradition, and people, colonizers who lost their way on the way to India and hit North America, found a way of thinking they were in India. And for a long time, we called Canada and any North American original peoples Indians, where, of course, that's a misnomer, that's a mistake. I want to acknowledge with great gratitude the privilege we have to live, work, convene, and create on these lands that are the lands of the original peoples. I'm in the lands of the 6 nations here, adjacent to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. And I encourage you to go to native-lands.ca and see who are the original people of the lands upon which you reside. We're talking about triggers today, and in thinking of triggers, a lot of things are triggering. Even the land acknowledgement, which is a standard for us now in the way we gather, and noting that, through treaty theft or occupation, these lands that we claim to be ours were not procured in fairness. And the idea of that is triggering for a lot of different people and for a lot of different reasons. We're full of triggers, certain sounds, certain smells, certain experiences or environments will trigger us. And usually when we talk about triggers, originally these would have been traumatic triggers or embedded mind control triggers. Those are the most common ways originally of talking about triggers. And now it's become a little more commonplace in the vernacular. And it's true that people are triggered. If something pushes a button and an emotion arises, that's it, right? Stimulus response, that's being triggered. In those deeper triggers, we're accustomed to diverting the emotions, bypassing the emotions. And we don't, unless we've dug into this kind of work, we don't have a lot of practice sitting with those stronger emotions. A gift of yoga is that it helps us build tolerance. And in a lot of the modern psychological work, they'll talk about distress tolerance and supporting people who have more extreme reactions to their triggers or severe emotional disruptions. And those emotional disruptions coming from early child trauma in the populations I'm thinking of right now. So a lot of the work on distress tolerance actually is extracted from yoga tradition. Typically, the first things that are taught for distress tolerance is mindfulness and managing the nervous system through the breath. So I would encourage us to begin today by centering ourselves and just playing with a bit of a mindfulness practice here. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just pause for a moment and come home to your body. Close your eyes if it helps, or just cast that gaze downwards. And this eye movement or closing of the eyes helps us tune inwards. And here in the inner world, we're not trying to change anything. We're not analyzing anything. We don't need to do anything with what we notice. We're simply witnessing the activity of the breath, the way our thoughts and feelings pass through awareness. Yoga teaches us to distinguish between mental activity and a discerning, accepting witness. So notice that there is a part of you that is able to remain calm and non-judgmental. And just watch those thoughts and feelings roll through. In the places where you notice a charge, we might say a trigger, thoughts and feelings that are more activating, whether towards joy or pain, we can simply notice that's a ping and let it also pass through awareness. Mindful of the breath, mindful of the thoughts and feelings rolling through. This awareness, this rehearsal of witnessing builds our ability to not be so swept away by the thoughts and feelings when they begin to rush or intensify, because we are developing a relationship with the part of ourselves that's able to remain loving, objective, witnessing, non-judgmental. We're cultivating a relationship with the part of self that is closest to the soul, that holds qualities of the divine like compassion, kindness, generosity, forgiveness, awareness, neutrality, and so on. So just giving ourselves that opportunity to step in to mindfulness. And mindfulness very much can be active as well. That as we come back to a bit of the lesson for today's Yoga for the Creative Soul gathering, continue to hold part of your awareness with the observer. We sometimes call this the intellect or the wisdom self. So part of you is listening and thinking and feeling and working with the information, and part of you is just watching it all happen, connected to the you that you truly are. This cultivation of relationship with the witness self helps us notice when we're triggered, so that we can also be responsive from that more objective place, even though our feelings, our nervous systems are really, really activated or shut down, as the case may be. triggered by the fact that a door is very slowly opening and there's no one there. Okay, but that's fine. I mean, weird stuff happens all the time. I mentioned already that acceptance, as we're working with it, is step one in the four-step process, the rest being concentration, doing our best, and non-attachment to end results. We'll talk about those more as we carry forward. Um, but a couple of notes on triggers themselves, that triggers, because of the way more traumatic memories tend to be stored, triggers themselves tend to be very sensory based. So emotional, as we've been talking about already, but could also be olfactory, the nose. A certain flavor might come into the mouth. Certain postures or feelings in the body, right? That as we're moving through having this button pushed, the sensory experiences that are related to that emotional button become very present. And we're empowered as practitioners of yoga to have the body have that sensory experience, but also stay connected to the observer, the objective witness, who can say, wow, that struck a chord. um, we're capable of analysis. What's that about? Where's that coming from? What do I need right now? But in the initial, it is enough to accept a button got pushed. As we stay mindful, as we continue to witness ourselves in a process of acknowledging triggers, maybe tracking triggers, we begin to build skills to tolerate the feelings that are associated with those triggers and eventually unravel the mysteries, where they come from, why are they having this effect, what is the soothing need, right? Because if we're having this triggering experience, it is an attempt for the mind body to resolve a past trauma. The triggers aren't just there to make our lives more difficult. This is the way trauma recovery happens. And if you don't want to identify it as trauma, because everybody gets triggered, then uncomfortable memories, painful past experiences, whatever your language is around that, the idea is this button got pushed. And because the button still exists, there is healing to be done. And the effects of that button being pushed give us clues and ideas of where the healing can happen, how we can be responsive. You'll hear it said sometimes that is either an ask from the body, from the system, or a tell, where it's telling the story of the past experience. But either way, when we're able to meet it with acceptance and hold it lightly, rather than gripping it so it runs through our fingers, and rather than diverting ourselves, putting on a podcast, scrolling our phones, even exercising, substance abuse, whatever that might be, the ways we take ourselves away from working through the triggers. If we can instead apply mindfulness and just tolerate it, even just for a breath or two, we begin to integrate those feelings. It settles down that monkey mind, and it leaves more available space for that wise, objective, loving witness self. There will be a program coming over the next month or two to go a little bit more down that rabbit hole itself of why do triggers happen and how do we uninstall them. But that is not right now. Yes, but just to give a nod for you to watch out for the Uninstalling Triggers program that's on the way, so you can do a little bit more for yourself with that. The activity that we're working with today here in the Yoga for the Creative Soul book club is found on page 87. And what I've done is that I've made it more gentle for the work we're doing together today. What you might decide to do is take that activity as it's put forth in the book and use it as an activity in your psychotherapy, a launching point for a deeper recovery, or making sure that you have a really nice aftercare strategy if you proceed with that one. It can be a bit more intense. Today, I'm doing my best to edge away from intensity. All right. So without further ado, then let us come back into our mindfulness and use that as a pathway to self-expression. We're thinking again about accepting the triggers and witnessing the triggers without needing to do anything about them. And as we go through this activity today, our intention is to tolerate those feelings a little bit better, understand them, and or get the message from the intense feelings that come up. So coming back to where we were, which is mindfulness, let's give ourselves a few breaths to recenter, closing the eyes if that's appropriate for you, and breathing. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And noticing the physiology, reactions to the conversation or recent happenings. There's no need to strive here, but if it feels better to encourage your breath to slow or deepen, you're welcome to. Just a gentle suggestion to the body. Calm. And the calmer the nervous system, the more access we tend to have to the witness. It's harder and harder to access that witness self if we're in a state of stress. As we're endeavoring to make that connection with the witness, we're watching the breath move. We're watching the thoughts and feelings flow. And we're setting an intention together to explore something that we dislike. So triggers exist on a spectrum, and there are some extreme triggers, very unwelcome triggers, even unsafe triggers for us to experience. And there are almost innocuous triggers, like a pet peeve. Is it still applicable to use the word trigger? We can have a discussion on that at a different time. But for our intents and purposes today, we are leaning towards that more innocuous edge, just striving for safety so we're not going into any of the big stuff while we're here outside of a professional mental health session. And the way we can play with it in our creative practice is to find a color or a medium that you really don't like. So I'm double whammying myself with pencil crayons. I wouldn't say I don't like pencil crayons, but I'm certainly not adept with them. And as one of those high achiever type personalities, I prefer to do things that I'm good at. How does that limit me in life? Again, a discussion for another time. But I know many of you who follow these videos have bits and pieces of that within yourself as well, tend to be an overachiever or identifying as perfectionistic or something in that realm. So perhaps there is a medium where you don't feel as accomplished and that pushes your buttons. Or maybe just as you're looking at that medium, there is a color that you avoid. And once you've picked that medium or selected that color, the next step is to use it. So I'm going to start with my dominant hand, and I'm just going to scribble on the page in this color. So more and more of my creative world is taken up by this color that I don't like. And partway through, I'm going to switch to my non-dominant hand. You can find your own way to do this. Maybe it's enough for you to just pick up those alcohol inks or markers, or maybe your own set of pencil crayons, and just dabble with the use, staying in that mindful place, noticing what's it like to engage with this color or with this medium. What happens to your breath? How is your body moving as you interface with it? Are your movements small and tight? Are they big and rebellious? What's that like? What's going on there? And continuing to watch the changes in breath and the changes in movement, also noticing how thoughts and feelings change. Is it all the same voice in your head, or do different voices arise? Do you want to change gears, do something differently? Do you fall into a stereotyped pattern, which tends to make us feel safer? When we're limiting our range of options, we tend to feel safer. And when you've had enough of interfacing with this color or with this medium, pause for a moment, set it all down, close your eyes if that's appropriate for you. And once again, notice, how is your breath? What's happening in your body? What are the current thoughts and feelings? So we're stepping all the way out of the creative or expressive activity, and we're moving into mindfulness practice. Just having a look. What's the same? What's different? What's at play within you? And giving yourself that little message that that's okay, right? This is some of what the objective observer does for us, is it brings the okayness. This is what is. I acknowledge what is. I accept what is, right? We're in this acceptance step of karma yoga. And if in time we wish to change it, then that is available to us. But that's not what we're doing right now. Then let's begin to shift the tone a little bit. If you are still open on the page where you were dabbling with that medium or using that color, turn the page, flip it over so you can't see it, go to a new page in your sketchbook, whatever that is, but we're going to create a container or a safe space. We're going to get away from that slightly triggering thing we were just doing. And even here in your mindfulness, acknowledge, observe, did setting it aside create a shift in your emotional set point, your breath, your somatic sense? Once it's set aside, as we're moving more fully back into mindfulness, is there a change in the quality of your thoughts and feelings? And then we're going to steer ourselves a little bit. So as you're here, connecting to your breath, connecting to thoughts and feelings, watching it play, but not needing to change it, turn up the corners of your mouth slightly and feel a calmness spread across your brow, clearing the forehead, soothing the mind. Turning up the corners of the mouth just slightly, creating apples in the cheeks. Feeling a softening through the throat and the chest. Relaxed over the back of the head, strong and easy through the sweep of the spine. The muscles and nerves that fan out from the backbone. Relaxing down the shoulders, arms, and hands. Relaxing down the hips, legs, and feet. Noting from that witness self what it's like to relax a bit more. And then invite into your imagination a sense of joy, a sense of pleasure, filling yourself with happiness, ease, goodness, contentment. In this observer, in the place of watching, make note of how it feels to feel good, where it is in your breath, where it is in your body, the kinds of thoughts that accompany it. Then move forth into creative action from this place of upliftedness, happiness, contentment. Doing your best to keep a parallel with what you've just done. Choose a medium that you love, that's easy and accessible for you, or choose a color that you truly enjoy looking at. And as you watch yourself, your responses, your observations, explore and experiment with this. Notice your breath. Notice the way you move this across the page. You may acknowledge differences in the quality of this action compared to what you were doing before. Does your breath continue in a similar way? Or does the breath change as you continue to work with this medium or color? Are the thoughts more active or less active? Is it easier or more challenging to stay present? You can keep going with this for a little while longer. Just noting that some of what we're playing with today is that dance between doing something or feeling something uncomfortable, dabbling into the trigger, and doing something or feeling something that's easy, comfortable, enjoyable. And all the while keeping our witness self with us, watching it play without needing to change it. Remaining connected to that witness, to your current experience, without judging or analyzing, without needing to change it. And without stepping all the way back into only a mindfulness experience, let's change again. You can go back to the page you were just working with, or you can start anew, setting side by side what felt nice and pleasurable and what was a little bit triggering. Grab that yucky color, go back to the medium that you have an aversion to. And even now that you know that we're changing gears, notice if there is a change in you, notice what that change is. Notice how the early signs of a trigger start to come up within you. You don't need to change them. We don't need to seek comfort. We're just a little bit practicing tolerating the discomfort, the less welcome emotions. And as you're playing this time with the color or medium, let's also acknowledge that something installed the button in the first place. This is why the program is called Uninstalling Triggers. That these buttons are well wired from the outside where experiences touch us through the inside, our emotions, our senses, our nervous systems, our neurology, our neural anatomy, as well as our thoughts. Deep, deep feelings there. The button's on the outside. The button itself is on the outside where we're interfacing with present day. When we do the inner work, like you're doing right now. And I invite you, by the way, just for now, to play as much as you want to with the back and forth. The color you don't like, the color you do like. The medium that's uncomfortable, the medium that you feel safe in. And continuing to notice as you move back and forth between them. These buttons exist on the outside so that present day experiences, when they bump up against that button, set off the inner workings that have to do with the past. So as we change gears once again, keep that pleasurable, safe, friendly, contented color or medium right there with you. Keep that page where you can see it, but let yourself shift more completely into the discomfort. And this time, as you're dabbling with this modality, whether with your dominant hand or your non-dominant hand, whether standing or sitting, whether big movements or small movements, as you're dabbling with the uncomfortable one, the one where aversion exists, the one that's connected to the button. As you notice your thoughts and feelings, also begin to allow yourself to express via this color or medium some of what is wired into you. If there is a question on the table, the question might be why? Why this aversion? Why this discomfort? And you don't need language to answer it. That's not what we're doing right now. We're staying with the witness self, we're watching it unfold, and we're moving with the support and purpose of the creative soul held in love and safety of the true self through some form of visual expression, letting the acknowledgement of why this aversion come through. Come through in the movement pattern, come through in the shapes you begin to create, come through even in the subtlety of the breath, or in a more obvious drawing. This is just for you. But let yourself dig into the why. Just a bit. All the while held and witnessed by the calm, safe, loving, objective, mindful part of yourself. So we're striving to give ourselves the opportunity to experience, express, and understand, even if only a little bit more. We're witnessing and allowing our genuine feelings. Somewhere deep inside, near the place where the wires of the buttons are installed within us, is a feeling that if we feel this stuff too much, it could kill us. And that might sound irrational, but if we look at the lengths we'll go to not have to feel our pain, you can see how that mortality might truly be at the heart of it, that mortal fear, pardon me. Feelings won't actually kill us. Not the emotions. They won't. But for a little while, it's uncomfortable enough that it feels like they might. And when we're not feeling them, when we're in avoidance rather than acceptance, it's like the monster grows. It feels more and more dangerous. So I appreciate your courage today as you've given yourself the chance to experience a bit more discomfort, to stay safe and mindful, even as you're expressing things that aren't so nice, aren't as pleasant. Acceptance is a skill, distress tolerance is a skill. And today you practiced, and you can watch the recording of today, scrub it for the highlights that are there for you, the most important parts, and do this again and again as often as you want to. There is a caution against endeavoring too much in the recovery journey without the support of a trusted professional. Trauma happens in isolation, recovery happens in community. So I do encourage you to process with a friend. Join us here Wednesdays at 12:30 to process together. The group's very supportive. If you want to post your ideas, experiences, creations in the Facebook group, Yoga for the Creative Soul Book Club. And as we now finish up those expressions and set them aside, give ourselves a moment to regard and to reflect upon what we have created. The group always begins with a check-in and ends with a sharing and a debriefing that happens in private, so that it's not splashed all over the internet. But if you wish to check in more privately, you can also post that request to the group and connect with your buddies more deeply. Carry on this process, knowing that you are in community, you are valued and important, and your journey is as well. So we'll go back to noticing the breath, noticing the body, offering appreciation to the creative self for coming through us and making itself known today. An appreciation for yourself for showing up, engaging, playing along in the ways that you did, accepting yourself and watching yourself, having the courage to face discomfort to whatever degree. Give ourselves a great big hug. Yes. And thank you so much. I look forward to moving on through this path of purpose with you next week. All the best.